And I guess we're ready.
1 second, we're going live.
Okay.
I just want to know what Larry is saying for me.
I don't know.
No, I was saying
I thought when I came-
Adam had spoken that you had emailed him that you might be a little late.
I made it up. Sorry, still a little dental fugue.
Yeah. Glad you can join us, Sam.
Adam, you're good to go.
Great. Thank you very much, Cody. Welcome, everyone, and good evening. My name is Adam Hertke. I'm the chair of the Land Use and Waterfront Committee here for CB6. I'd like to welcome you all to another exciting meeting of our committee. Tonight's focus will be around the waterfront with two main items. And so with that, I'm going to turn to the scripts and we will begin our meeting. Okay, today is November 23rd, 2020, and this is another meeting of the CB6 Land Use and Waterfront Committee. Okay, tonight we are joined by our Assistant District Manager, Cody Osterman. Members of the public, you can raise your hand. You can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Okay, I believe, Cody, we have Kavitha, is that correct, is going to be taking minutes this evening?
Yes.
Excellent. Kavitha, thank you very much. Once we meet together again, probably in the spring of next year, hopefully, we'll be sure to reward you with candy and the tradition that Mark Thompson has established many moons ago. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, Cody, can you begin with roll call and attendance for the committee members?
For 1 moment.
Thank you.
All right. Committee members, I will call your name. Please unmute yourself and say present. Jim Collins. Adam Hartke.
Present.
Kavitha Matthew.
Present.
Sandy McKee.
Present.
Wells Magali. Jean Santoro.
Here.
Larry Shire.
Present.
Ann Seligman.
Here, and I think Wells is here too.
I do see Wells there. Maybe some audio. Wells? Lou Sapersky?
Yeah.
Right. Sandro Sherrod? Sandro? Letty Simon?
Here.
Kathy Thompson? Molly Hollister?
Here.
All right. Wells is saying in the chat that she's having an audio issue and then she's going to join by phone. So you've got 11 members present.
Excellent. Thank you, Cody. Okay. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and appears on the screen before you.
Oh,
or it will shortly. Sorry. There we go. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you have no objection to the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Okay, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is okay. The minutes from the October 26th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. There is no objection. We will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. All right, seeing no objections, the minutes from the October 26th meeting has been adopted. They will be available on the CB6 website. Okay. And now for some more ground rules. So in order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until the floor is granted. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make the motion, please raise your hand via Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear before you, and you should find the raise hand function. If you're still having technical difficulties, Cody can assist. Okay, please do not use the chat function. Please don't. We've all been through this, so I'm not going to say more on that. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you may speak. Okay, we are required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. All right, with that said, we are going to jump into tonight's very full agenda. So we have two main items, but they're very big, so we're very looking forward to it. Okay, so the first item on the agenda tonight is from the Department of City Planning. They will be offering a brief presentation on the zoning for the coastal flood resiliency. Following the presentation, the committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions. Then after the committee members have asked their questions, we will open the floor to the public hearing in order for comments and questions on this proposal. Aska and Scott will give their presentations. And then following their presentation, the committee members, will basically what I said before. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, with that said, Aska and Scott, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us at this meeting today. I also want to thank many of you who have been part of this work in the years since Hurricane Sandy. Zoning for coastal flood resiliency poses updates to the zoning resolutions, Article 6, Chapter 4, and other related sections. I will be sharing my screen with the presentation. So we're going to go through a brief overview of what is a very detailed text zoning amendment that improves upon the existing flood text and makes it permanent. If you want to hear more information about any of the proposal, we can stay for questions, or you can look at a detailed project summary and the entire annotated text amendment at nyc.gov/ZCFR. And we can follow up on any questions we can't answer today. What we're asking for is your recommendations from on the text amendment. This has been referred to all 59 community boards, borough boards, and borough presidents, and the recommendations for this the City Planning Commission is requested by December 28th. The first half of the presentation will be an overview of the current regulatory framework and what we've learned about zoning issues communities have been facing since Hurricane Sandy. And in the second half, I will present the proposal in 4 separate sections, each highlighting the project's 4 main goals. So a little background about why exactly we're doing this. While there are many sources of flooding that pose issues in New York City, coastal storms present the most significant flood risk in terms of compromising human safety, property damage, and business disruption. With 520 miles of coastline, New York is very much a coastal city. When we are analyzing the city's coastal risk, we tend to focus on the area that FEMA designates as the high-risk flood zone, or the area that has a 1% chance of risk of being flooded every year. However, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy awakened us to a more widespread risk of inundating well beyond that area. Close to half of the properties that are technically classified as being at moderate risk of flooding or having 0.2% of chance of flooding were inundated. In the 2 areas combined, almost 1 million New Yorkers live at risk of being flooded by a coastal storm. For CB6, that translates to about 9,500 residents in the high-risk zone and about 14,000 residents in the moderate risk zone. And with climate change, the floodplain will continue to expand. By the 2050s, today's moderate risk flood zone of 0.2% will likely be the high risk for flooding. So we have to look to the future when planning for resiliency. I also want to point out that while this map is zoomed into Manhattan for the purpose of this presentation, and a lot of the references I'll be making will be in reference to CB6, this amendment is a citywide text amendment, and the city's floodplain is very diverse. So, and with that comes very diverse neighborhoods and very diverse and unique challenges for stay safe. And this text amendment has to accommodate these varying neighborhoods. We have tried our best to focus primarily on the provisions applicable to CB6 in this presentation, but since the text has a citywide application and the board is asked to comment on the totality of the text, this presentation might show some building typologies that are not typical of Manhattan, like single-family detached homes. The wide range of challenges that come with flood risk adaptation require strategy that involves multiple lines of defenses. So the city has some coastal defense strategies like the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, which most of you are probably familiar with, as well as infrastructure improvements and emergency preparedness. However, these are all different portions of achieving the goal of resiliency, and this text is only coming into play when it is how it's related to buildings. So while it works in conjunction with other projects and other resiliency efforts, the text itself will mostly have to do with how to make the buildings, existing and new, more resilient to flood. For context, I wanted to show a brief snapshot of the buildings within the floodplain in CB6. These are mostly older residential buildings that would greatly benefit from the option to retrofit resiliency measures made available by this text. In order to understand exactly how this text promotes resiliency in buildings, we have to first understand the New York City Building Code. So briefly, regulations are based on FEMA standards for buildings in the flood zone. And these regulations are located in Appendix G of the New York City Building Code. Compliance with such rules are generally required for new and significantly modified existing buildings constructed in the flood zone. The zoning resolution is an added layer that is meant to accommodate these regulations while also improving neighborhoods. So the two work together, but the requirements for how the buildings are made resilient lie within the New York City Building Code. So looking first at these building code requirements, they are based on the building's location within the flood zone and what the building code calls design flood elevation, or DFE, which can be seen in the blue dotted line here. DFE is the height that floodwaters could be expected to rise, plus additional freeboard or additional elevation for protection. For residential buildings, all living spaces must be located at or above the DFE, as you can see on the building on the left. Any spaces below must be wet flood proofed, meaning it is designed to allow water to flow in and out. Those wet flood proof spaces may only be used for parking, storage, and access. These buildings may not have any living spaces below ground. For non-residential or mixed-use buildings, they can also make use of the wet flood proofing methods, but they also have the option to dry flood proof and locate some uses below the DFE. Dry flood proofing means meeting specific design and materials requirements so that water cannot enter the building during a flood event. This strategy allows uses to be located close to the sidewalk level, but it can be extremely expensive and especially challenging in locations with high water tables or high DFEs. These building code regulations became widely applicable soon after the storm, but posed conflicts with the zoning resolution in three main ways. Rules that regulate where certain uses shall be located, bulk regulations that govern the size and shape of buildings, and how buildings interface with the public realm. So this is where this text comes in. It is meant to build on the previous two zoning text amendments that were put in place shortly after Hurricane Sandy and remove barriers within the zoning resolution that make it hard for new and existing buildings in the floodplain to meet the building code requirements for flood-resistant construction. Ultimately, zoning for coastal flood resiliency will help those living and working in the floodplain to reduce damage from future coastal storms, be resilient in the long term by accounting for future risks from climate change, and potentially help save on flood insurance costs. It would also assist with disaster recovery by setting a framework for emergency situations, including the present situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. The two text amendments that the city adopted post-Sandy on an emergency basis helped address these issues. However, these rules are already expiring. If these rules are not made permanent, it would hinder the protection of existing vulnerable buildings and disincentivize the resiliency measures in new construction, making our neighborhoods less resilient. Through several years, we conducted citywide research about resiliency strategies of different building types and studied 10 neighborhoods that were severely impacted by the storm. From this work, we gathered insights from stakeholders and partner city agencies, which helped us uncover additional zoning barriers to resilient construction. We took our public engagement further and briefed more than 3,000 stakeholders and across all boroughs through different forms of outreach, such as presentations to elected officials and the technical community, community workshops, and other types of public events. Our community workshops were key in identifying neighborhood priorities and individual needs regarding making buildings safe to coastal storms. Our goal was twofold. One, to educate the community on flood risk and the range of regulations that are required and available to them in the flood zone. And two, learn from residents and the technical community how they envision the buildings where they live, work, or help design being more resilient. As a result of this extensive outreach, we have learned valuable lessons which helped inform the zoning for coastal flood resiliency text. We realized that our rules were predominantly focused on low-density residential areas. They mostly assisted buildings that can be physically elevated, such as detached homes. However, they were not enough in assisting residents relocate all living spaces above the DFE or over-elevate the lowest floor above future flood levels. Attached homes and multifamily buildings, such as the ones within the CB6 floodplain, were not sufficiently addressed since they must evacuate spaces below the DFE and relocate them on the top of the structure, a retrofit strategy that requires more flexibility. And businesses were also not sufficiently addressed as they need high visibility from sidewalks, but also because many heavily rely on cellars or from being at grade for operations. We also did not assist all types of communities across the city's floodplain. Certain older neighborhoods that don't match our current rules, either use of bulk regulations, did not get enough relief to make buildings more resilient. Rules that gave additional height and allowed certain spaces to be exempted from floor area varied by the flood level, leading to unintended and inequitable outcomes, such as resilient buildings being built out of scale for the neighborhood, or loopholes within the text that allowed developers to make buildings bigger but not necessarily resilient. Our streetscape regulations also had inconsistent and insufficient applicability, particularly in medium and high density districts. And lastly, we realized that there are rules that need to be readily available quickly after a disaster strikes. And so this text amendment could be one way to get closer to the city's overall disaster preparedness. These are all lessons learned since the flood text was initially introduced in 2013. Now I will briefly go through the proposal to describe how zoning for coastal flood resiliency addresses these issues while encouraging the city's buildings to be more resilient. After a long process of studying the floodplain and engaging with so many stakeholders in the community on a wide set of issues, we were able to establish 4 overarching goals that help us move from Sandy recovery to a longer-term resiliency strategy. Number 1, the floodplain community wants to be able to prepare buildings for flooding, even if they're not located in FEMA currently determines to be the highest risk flood zone. 2, people also want the option to raise living spaces higher than the current flood level that FEMA projects, because they have seen higher flood levels already and expect that risk to grow in the future with sea level rising, and therefore the expected flood level in the event of a storm. Residents and business owners want to be able to invest in resiliency incrementally, so it's more affordable over time. They want options like moving their mechanical equipment to a higher elevation without necessarily triggering a requirement to raise or fully flood-proof the structure. And lastly, we know that we need a way for the city to be nimbler in responding to future events that might require rebuilding homes or other forms of recovery. So now for each goal, we will present a set of strategies to help achieve them and go over a selection of regulations that we are proposing, which are applicable in Community Board 6. In goal number 1, it speaks more to where the proposed zoning text would apply. These regulations are optional to help buildings undertake resiliency improvements. ZCFR would expand the applicability of the current text to a broader set of buildings that are also exposed to flooding in the event of coastal storms. Any lot located within either the high risk or moderate risk floodplains would be allowed to use the proposed special options for resilient building design. This map shows what that means for CB6. The lots in yellow are where these rules currently apply under the existing flood text, and the lots in red is where these regulations are being expanded to. So these are where the floodplain is at 0.2% currently, but is expected to be at 1% by 2050s. The second goal illustrates options that would be available only if the building fully meets or exceeds Appendix G of the building code. These are split into 5 separate strategies, but I will focus on the first 3 for CB6. More streamlined optional rules for how height is measured in the floodplain would allow building owners to physically elevate habitable spaces and other building support features above expected flood elevations so they are safe in the long term. Currently, the 2013 flood text already allows maximum height to be measured from the DFE and allows extra height in situations where buildings are located in areas with certain high flood level elevations. This extra height allows buildings to have a more useful ground floor, and we learned that over time it also helps with long-term resiliency. Today, building heights can be bumped to 9, 10, or 12 feet depending on the building's use and zoning district, making it a highly complex framework. And because its applicability depends on the flood elevation level, slight topography changes can lead to inconsistent outcomes on the same street of a neighborhood. The proposal would make those height allowances more consistent and equitably distributed by allowing heights to be measured from a new reference plane that can be placed up to 10 feet above grade in the 1% floodplain and up to 5 feet in the 0.2% floodplain. This would also require that the floor level is placed at or above this reference plane to ensure that additional building height is tied to actual resiliency improvements, and it would close a loophole that currently exists for developers to get additional height without making the building resilient. To help promote safer buildings, the good long-term resilient design and good neighborhood streetscape, the proposal would also conduct small changes to existing ground floor regulations. The proposal would allow existing floor area exemptions for spaces that are wet flood proofed to apply to both existing and new buildings, since these spaces pursuant to building code can only be used for parking, storage, and building access. This allowance helps support buildings adapt to climate change. The current rules also include floor area exemptions for spaces that are dry flood proofed to promote active uses at the street level. However, there are 2 sets of rules. On your left, you can see a provision that applies to existing buildings, which would exempt the entire dry flood proofed space. On the right, you can see a rule that applies to new and existing buildings, which allowed any space to be exempted from floor area if more than half of the floor is below the flood level. We call these spaces cellar. This rule was first implemented in 1989 and was then edited by the 2013 flood text to be even more flexible. The problem with the cellar exceptions system is that it allowed full floors to be entirely exempted without actually requiring the building to comply with resiliency standards. It also encouraged squished ground floors with low ceilings and sunken ground floors which are extremely vulnerable to flooding. Ultimately, these 2 rule exemptions ended up promoting buildings out of scale and ground floors that were less marketable and effective for active use. This proposal would modify these regulations to reduce the amount of floor area that can be exempted to instead only allow the first 30 feet of a space that is dry flood proof to be exempted from floor area, provided that the space is used for non-residential uses, complies with certain standard requirements such as minimum transparency and internal clearance. This would help encourage active uses close to the street and sidewalk and promote a safe and lively pedestrian environment while making sure that the resulted buildings are not out of scale. In addition, this proposal would mandate a set of streetscape requirements to improve the ground floor level design of resilient buildings. Moving on to goal 3, these provisions are what we call partial resiliency strategies. They will help building owners to undertake incremental steps toward resiliency without requiring the structure or sites to fully meet Appendix G, which is cost prohibitive. This would be extremely helpful for the older buildings in CB6 to implement resiliency efforts over time. We learned that raising mechanical equipment, often located below grade within cellars, is the first and most cost-effective step to make buildings more resilient. The proposal would continue to allow the relocation of equipment and enable more options for their placement above the flood level, either on top of roofs or in a separate structure, by considering mechanical equipment as permitted obstruction. As shown in this picture, this is particularly relevant for housing campuses such as Peter Cooper Village and Stuytown in CB6. And a big portion of the floodplain also contains businesses that offer either neighborhood services or are part of the large industrial economy of the city. Many of these buildings cannot be completely elevated or dry flood proof due to cost or operational needs, but many of these business owners would like to raise priority spaces and equipment above harm's way so they can minimize business disruption in case of a storm event. This proposal would also enable different types of flood protection measures to be implemented. This would include allowances for flood panels and landscape berms to be considered permitted obstructions in open areas. It would also allow spaces used for the storage of panels to be exempted from floor area to enable on-site storage. Again, this is a cost-effective strategy that older buildings can implement. Lastly, when looking at our waterfront sites, zoning generally does not allow waterfront yards or required visual corridors to be raised to account for flood risk. Many sites at the water's edge are also required to provide public access using specific design standards and have little flexibility to accommodate best resiliency practices. This proposal would offer more flexibility for the grading of these sites and would facilitate resiliency measures such as soft shorelines. Now, I will speak about our final goal, which is different from the previous ones in that these rules would mostly apply not just in the floodplain, but on a citywide level. Sandy showed us how a storm's effects can go beyond the floodplain, especially regarding issues with our energy grid. The proposal will therefore allow power systems, including generators and solar energy systems, to be considered a permitted obstruction in open areas across all zoning districts to facilitate their installation. In addition, to ensure all areas of the city can easily provide ADA access, the proposal would classify both ramps and lifts as permitted obstructions in all required open areas to facilitate accessible design. Another important issue is how disasters, especially those that require the evacuation of residents, impact vulnerable populations. Hurricane Sandy and other storms across the nation have exposed the difficulties facing nursing home residents in areas of high-risk flooding. Nursing homes are licensed to house populations that require continual medical care, and research shows that this dependency can be strained whether nursing homes shelter in place or evacuate prior to a coastal storm. Therefore, the city believes it would be appropriate to limit the growth of nursing homes in high-risk areas to lessen the health consequences and logistical challenges of evacuating the residents of these facilities. The proposal is not citywide and would only prohibit the development of new nursing homes within the 1% floodplain and other selected geographies like likely to have limited vehicular access during a storm event. I want to emphasize that existing facilities would still be able to conduct enlargements for modest improvements, including those that help with resiliency. Lastly, Sandy showed us that a lengthy process to update zoning regulations can slow disaster response. The proposal would make certain recovery provisions available to be enabled quickly following future disasters, and some of these provisions would be implemented now to help address the COVID-19 pandemic and its associated economic effects. Considering the situation we are going through right now with COVID, the proposal will be triggering two sets of rules that help provide a more predictable, longer-term method to administer the current recovery efforts. The first one allows uses that do not conform with our use regulations to come back to business even if they're discontinued for more than 2 years, which is the current limitation on allowing non-conforming uses to come back. The other rule would give applicants that are running out of time with special permits and authorizations that came to the CPC for approval to get an additional term so they can complete their original plan of construction. These rules would assist with the medium-term recovery from the pandemic's impacts to the economy. In terms of next steps, the citywide text amendment has been referred out on October 19, 2020 to all 59 community boards, and borough presidents for 60 days. Then it will go to the CPC and City Council before adoption. More information about the project, including an annotated version of the proposed zoning text, can be found at DCP's website. This concludes the presentation about the proposed changes. Thank you for allowing me the time to update you on this important text amendment, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Very informative and very interesting presentation. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up to the members of the committee and CV6 for any immediate questions. And if you do have questions to the committee, will you please raise your hand in Zoom? And okay, I see one. Okay, Susan, I see that your hand's raised. I know that you're on a tight schedule, so we'll go ahead and go to you first. Here, let me allow to talk. Okay.
I very much appreciate it. The question I have regards whether or not the siting of power plants are considered in these text amendments. And if so, are there any limitations to their size, to their floor area? Are there any provisions at all?
So this text amendment is the sources of power and energy that are addressed in this text amendment have to do with the ones that are on site for individual buildings or individual projects. They're not necessarily about larger infrastructure improvements or rather infrastructures of energy plants. So this wouldn't be something that we're addressing those things.
Well, I'm actually discussing two proposed power plants for my community, Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village. They're combined heat and power plants, and they're new.
Is that an on-site for the
Yes.
Yes. So in that case, that this would allow those certain there are certain limitations in size and location, the details of which I can get to you later on from the zoning text amendment. But they do have, this allows for certain, it has requirements for screening as well as where those can be located and how large they will be.
Thank you. I'd very much like that. My email, may I give it to you now or put it in the chat, or what do I do, Adam?
That's good. Actually, we can
have
forward it to Oscar and Scott, right, Cody?
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it and look forward to your response.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Adam.
Anne, I see that your hand's raised, but Cody, I guess so. As we can make a smooth transition to the public forum. What would be, it would be best for members of the public, if they have any questions or comments, to submit to start typing their questions into the Q&A. Is that correct?
Yes, they can use the Q&A box to write their name, their affiliation. Like, for example, Susan just spoke. She's
Yeah,
on
CBC.
the Stuytown, Peter Cooper Village, right? And your questions, and then we'll, once you start the public hearing, we'll time everyone for their allotted time to speak.
Great. Excellent, Cody. Thanks. So members of the public, if you do have questions, you can go ahead and start typing those into the chat right now. I'll go ahead and remind again for the formal public hearing once that starts. But Anne, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. If other people have questions, I'd love them to go first. And if no one has asked mine, I can hold out.
You can ask one right now.
Okay, well, let's see. What do I want to choose first? Because I've got a few. One that you just touched on is about issues with CSOs. And I'm curious, this is not necessarily the biggest issue, but I know there is some talk about integrating CSOs and like how those are going to be reformed. And I guess I'm just wondering how those are going to be integrated. Like, I want to make sure you guys are, kind of talking to DEP about that.
I don't remember talking about CSOs. Can you, what you were?
There was a slide earlier where you were talking about what's, dealing with, literally it was like waterfront issues.
So,
And I mean, CSOs are like, we're talking today, I know, about issues that are hopefully, 100-year floods, 50-year floods. I don't know. We don't really talk about them. Maybe 5-year floods, since we've done nothing to address climate change in the last 4 years. But, CSOs are an everyday problem. And so I would like to think that the reforms that were being made for land use are being integrated with what DEP is doing to try and improve CSO issues.
So CSO, like I mentioned briefly in the beginning of my presentation, this text amendment is just one effort in resiliency, and this one focuses mostly on the coastal flood resiliency. So it's based on FEMA's maps of 1% and 0.2% floodplain, and making buildings within those floodplains resilient. CSOs are definitely an issue that the city is dealing with, but this text doesn't address those exactly.
I guess that's my point is that those two things should be addressed at the same time. There should be some connection, because it's all water, right? Like, there should be some connection there.
Yeah, I mean, we would love that recommendation when you provide the recommendation to CPC to consider those things. But like for as of right now, the floodplain is what's the main focus of this text because it's based heavily on New York City's building code, which takes into only account the FEMA floodplain and not necessarily flooding all across the city caused by other flood issues, which are definitely an issue that the city is dealing with and should deal with. And I agree with you in that aspect. But this text particularly has to do with, because of the technicality of it being related directly to the city's building code, and those building codes based on the floodplain maps created on a federal level by FEMA. It's limited in that where it can be applied.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne. We can consider that. Oh, Sandy, I see your hand raised.
Yes, sorry. I had a question. We've got the East Coast Resiliency Project, which is building the flood wall. Does that mean that the maps will change and we actually will not need this particular zoning amendment because we no longer are in the floodplain? Majority of CB6.
Yes, so as the floodplain changes, and the floodplain change is memorialized by FEMA in their maps, the applicability of this text will change as well. So over time, if there are other projects like Escr and other coastal flood resiliency projects that happen along the coastline of New York City, the floodplain is projected to change. And with that change, the applicability of this will change. However, we don't want to wait for the years where that is going to take those floodplain changes and those map changes to occur to provide resiliency. So this text amendment would ensure that buildings can become resilient now ahead of the upcoming hurricane season and other things. So this, but hopefully in the future, we won't need to rely on these things.
But won't the East Coast Resiliency Project be finished in the next few years? So we're talking about sort of a 2-year time frame that this is going to be in place versus change, or do we know when the FEMA maps will be changed based on
Question, yeah.
The changes in the FEMA map, those regulations and those timelines they take a lot longer. However, even if this is something that changes within CB6, this is a citywide text amendment. So while the Escr might prevent a lot of the flooding and change the flood maps along CB6, there will be other parts of the city that this wouldn't change much in that aspect. So this isn't necessarily just for CB6, this is for the entire city. So those changes won't affect everywhere.
Understood, but this is going to, if it's implemented in the next 2 years, it will affect our district during that time period. And my understanding is that it's taking density and putting it higher, basically. So it will make a change to our neighborhood that may not be necessary.
The density that it's adding or changing isn't, it's not something that doesn't exist currently.
Right,
So,
it's existing density that's just being moved higher.
No, I mean, this text, most of CB6 is within the 1% floodplain, and as is, even without this text amendment, there is the 2013 flood text that already allows for those height and FAR restrictions. If anything, this is actually reducing a lot of the height, where it's limiting it to 10 feet only, whereas in the previous text, it could go a lot higher. And also it is reducing the FAR that is exempted. That previously the entire floor was exempted for FAR, and it was adding another floor on top, whereas this limits how much FAR is exempted by being only 30 feet 30 feet within from the street level for dry flood proof buildings.
Oscar, can I suggest you bring up the presentation again? Because some of those concepts are quite technical in those terms, so it might be easiest to talk to the diagrams in that sense. But yeah, to reiterate what Oscar was saying there, Sandy, a lot of these mechanisms or the concepts that we're talking about, they already exist. The expansion of them exists into the 0.2% area, which was the red part that you saw on the CB6 maps. And the rest of it is sort of ironing out issues that we've found. So the relocation of bulk that you're referring to, it's existed in the 2013 text amendment and the 2015 text amendment, and I'm told has existed in some capacity since 1983. So I mean the take up of that, we don't expect to be hugely more significant out of this, because it's not development inducing. It's more ironing out loopholes and trying to ensure that this is a more robust text that also applies to what will likely be defined very soon as the future 1% floodplain.
But there may not be as much incentive for older buildings to retrofit because of the East Coast Resiliency Project. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in that aspect, this is completely optional. So building owners can choose to retrofit or not, depending on their need. And if they feel that they need protection in the coming immediately, or if it's something that they could wait out and they don't want to, implement a lot of this currently.
This is a more technical question, the one that Sandy asked earlier. How often does FEMA update their flood maps? Is it like once every 5 years? Is it once the ESCR is complete? Do we know when they would update and change their flood maps?
Sorry, Askar, I hope you weren't about to say anything there. I don't personally, or I don't think we personally know exactly when FEMA updates their maps. However, to answer a question that Sandy had raised earlier, we're not expecting the map that relates to the Escr project, and I'm sure the folks that are talking after us can talk more to this. We're not expecting them to be updated until about 2026. So I guess effectively what this text is doing is sort of plugging a 6-year hole until the anticipated completion of that project, and FEMA has the time to update the corresponding maps. And having said that, it would only apply to where Escr has actually been able to provide some benefit, which largely in CB6, yes, is behind the Escr wall. But obviously the rest of the city also benefits from this text, and they're not getting the benefit of the Escr infrastructure. So there is some broader consideration there from the department.
One maybe question that's more citywide. I know at one point there was a lot of discussion about retreat. That was one of the R's of the resiliency retreat. And is that no longer a position that the city's taking?
So it's not necessarily something that could, like, there are certain parts of the city where the only option is retreat, and that is the city is exploring those things, and it has already, with the city's buyback program that was implemented, like, has made attempts to do that, but it's not something that can be implemented across all 520 miles of coastline that New York City has. There are close to 1 million residents in New York City, and a retreat option for every single neighborhood or every single coastline wouldn't necessarily be the most efficient way of handling coastline, especially if we're having these different projects and resiliency efforts like Escr and this zoning amendment.
Thank you. I saw Kyle had raised his hand earlier and then eventually lowered it. Kyle, did you want to say anything? Did you want to ask?
It was pretty much on the same line as Sandy's questioning. I just want to thank again Aska and the rest of your colleagues for presenting again. I was on the borough board last week. But just kind of a minor follow-up on the previous questioning. Is there any provisions within this that would allow any of these types of buildings to sell their air rights in the future, or does that closing of the loophole address those concerns?
Scott, do you know anything about air right development? Because
no, so this doesn't give them any. It relates in no way to air rights. I mean, the only differences we're talking about, or the way bulk becomes relevant here, is when someone floodproofs their ground floor in some respect, and they are able to seek a compensation for that to relocate the bulk that is in the floodplain elsewhere within the building. I mean, unless they were to pursue some sort of like complex zoning lot merger or something like that to get a small amount of floor area off their site, I mean, transferable development rights is not really an issue here at all.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. All right, so I see Sandra, then Wells, and then Anne, and then I think we're then going to open up to the public hearing session. All right, Sandra, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me now? Having some sound issues. Sorry about that. So I had a kind of a follow-up question for the existing buildings that are either in the substantially damaged or substantially improved. How does that work when, in our southern portion of the district, we have large developments with multiple buildings, Waterside, Peter Cooper Village, Stuyvesant. How does this apply in terms of improvements or potential changes to existing multi-building locations?
Yeah, so this text particularly added under goal 3, the ability to incrementally do resilient work, because that was one of the things that previously did not exist and was causing a lot of cost prohibitive issues for buildings to, if they wanted to just relocate their mechanical equipment, that was triggering within the building code that they had to then kind of, conform to all of Appendix G. So this zoning amendment is actually allowing more of an incremental increase so that it would allow them to, retrofit in a more planned and long-term way rather than requiring that right away every single building must be retrofitted to resiliency.
So just so I understand, so hypothetically, if a development had 10 buildings, 3 of which were damaged in the last 10 years during a flooding incident, what does that mean? That all or part of the mechanicals, because maybe they're all 10 are within the 1% zone, could be reconfigured to be on the roof, just kind of in improving the flood resiliency, but then bypassing other concerns like sight lines and that sort of thing?
Well, to apply this text, it's not necessarily that you need to have a building that was damaged. As long as the building was in the floodplain, this text applies. So regardless of how many buildings were damaged or not damaged, the provisions of this text are not related to damage, but rather the location of that building within the floodplain.
Got it. So that would potentially apply to all 10 in that case. Right. Thank you.
Escr, can I add to that as well? If you could go to slide 5, I think that probably shows a map of what I'm hoping Sandra was talking about there, where, you can see, and I'm sorry, that's somewhat small. You can see that, say, Stuytown is only partially affected on the flood map here.
Right.
So your question is, do all the buildings benefit from this text amendment, or only those that are actually identified within the floodplain?
Correct.
Yeah, so once the zoning lot is impacted by the zoning maps, the whole zoning lot is able to benefit from the text amendment provisions.
Thank you very much, Scott.
I think slide 20 actually has the better map. That's you don't have to zoom in on.
Yeah, so this one shows the lot itself that will be that are able to use these proposed optional rules.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wells, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, because I had audio issues earlier. Okay, so I have a follow-up question on slide 22. This may have been answered, but I just have a clarifying question. So in the 1% and the 0.2% floodplains, which I assume corresponds to the 100-year and 500-year floodplain elevations, in your proposed rule, you're saying that the new reference plane would be either at a max 10 feet or 5 feet above grade. So that implies, based on the parenthetical, that it's a max 10 feet above grade in the 1% and a max 5 feet above grade in the 0.2%, respectively. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in the previous text, in the 2013 text, the reference plane at 9, 10, or 12, is that also measured above grade?
Yeah, so previously it was 9, 10, or 12, depending on the building's use and the zoning district. So it wasn't consistent across all buildings, and there was no floodplain or a reference plane for the 0.2% floodplain. So now the proposed text would have it at max 10 feet for 1% and max 5 feet for 0.2%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And the floor is yours, and then we're going to move into public comment.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
You muted yourself, Anne.
And you muted yourself.
Sorry about that. Yep, I think I'm here now. Sorry about that.
Okay, good.
So my first question, I do have two, but I think they're both quick. One of them is building on Kyle's question, which was one of my original questions, which is there are issues around the city with people wanting to build super talls, and they are kind of abusing the use of mechanical spaces to make buildings taller. So they say, oh, we can't have them in the basement, so we, put them at this location. But instead of it being an 8-foot floor, an 8-foot floor, it's a 20-foot floor, so that their buildings are even taller. And I'd love to know if there's anything that can be put in this to ensure that those mechanical spaces that are above ground are not abused. And maybe that's kind of already in there, but I just know that this is something that's happening. So I'd love to watch out for that. And my other question is kind of related to what Sandra was asking about buildings that or developed areas that have kind of partial problems. And I guess I'm wondering how you find the balance between getting rid of regulations that are obstructive and make sure you are maintaining the regulations that actually were put in there for a good reason in the first place.
So to
or will be necessary going forward.
Yeah, so for your second question, so the text, let me just go to the side really quick. Okay, so it's this incremental retrofits that the text is allowing for is limited in what it is permitting. So it has to do with mechanical equipment, or it has to do with support spaces and flood protection measures. So it's not necessarily, and these things that over our extensive outreach and our extensive outreach to the other agencies within the city as well as the community, we have found that these specific issues were actually hindrances to complying to building. So a lot of this stuff already exists in the building code, but the zoning was kind of creating a hindrance in applying them rather than allowing them. So it's not something that we are necessarily permitting out of nowhere, but it's something that has been existing, but was just creating some administrative issues and creating some issues in terms of how long it would take buildings to actually retrofit and things like that within the development timeline. So this is just eases some of those restrictions.
Is there a way to clarify that so it's not kind of undoing or redoing of an undoing of a regulation, something else? It seems like a quadruple negative somehow.
And is there a provision you're thinking of specifically there? I'm trying to visualize this.
No, I just am thinking about regulations building on themselves over and over. And I would have to look at it more closely, honestly, to say, but I will take a look and I'll let you know if there's an issue specifically.
Please do. I think, we always try and find a balance in these things. And I think we acknowledge that, not only is this a super technical text amendment,
but for sure.
It's also, it's treading a really fine line of, trying to help private owners implement very expensive resiliency measures, whilst trying to acknowledge that because those are so expensive, they may need some relief in other areas. So, the bulk question that was asked earlier is a small amount of relief that owners can recapture because, say, for instance, if you are, dry floodproofing your ground floor, effectively what you are doing is building a reverse swimming pool.
Right.
in your ground floor. And
Right.
I mean, the structural and the glazing and the ceiling costs associated with that are huge. So, I guess what we're trying to do here, and obviously this is half of the reason why this is on, public review right now, is so that we can get your comments as to whether we have struck the right balance here. It is really trying to make sure that we're, incentivizing private owners to actually engage in improving their properties to increase resiliency, so they can lower insurance costs, and we can make sure there's less issues next time there is a storm event. But I mean, I certainly acknowledge that, we are trying to find that balance that you note, and really we like your comments on it. So I think that was to your second question. Initially, you had asked about voids too, right?
Initially I had asked about super talls and their abuse of mechanical spaces to add extra height.
Yes. So, I mean, certainly I understand how that could, I guess, be a perception of this, because we are talking about, the relocation of mechanicals. The city did actually address that in R9 and R10 and equivalent commercial districts a year or so ago through the mechanical voids text amendment. And what that did is, in those zoning districts, it introduced, and I think I may have actually presented the proposal to you at the time, it introduced a threshold where buildings, primarily residential buildings in those districts, they have a certain amount of floor area centrally within the building, not floor area, sorry, mechanical space, before they are considered floor area. So that threshold with this text amendment still exists. This won't supersede it. So, I mean, just to refresh your memory, the threshold existed when a building is using more than 50% of a floor, and is more than 25 feet in height. Anything over 25 feet in height, it starts counting as floor area for that development. And if they have multiple of those mechanical areas, then if they're within 75 feet of one another, then they start counting as floor area as well. So those provisions wouldn't actually be changed because of this. It's really just, it's relocating existing plant equipment to other spaces within the building, and in some instances, say for in the instance of Stuytown, in other places on the site, if the owner chose to, and that allows it to be considered, if it's on the site, as a permitted obstruction. So that wasn't previously available to many sites because they had to, contain it within a building or within a structure that was outside of open space, but this would actually allow it to do that. So to answer your question in short, the threshold of what is considered a mechanical void, which our text amendment addressed last year, will not change because of this.
Great. Thank you, Scott. You always have great answers.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to open it up to the public session now. So far, we have 3 people who have entered into chat. I will reread the instructions for clarity and formality. Okay, so we are now going to be opening the public hearing for the land use application N210095ZRY. Zoning text amendment we just heard from the Department of City Planning. Any member of the public who wishes to comment on this application, please do so by declaring your name, affiliation, your question and comment in the Q&A function of Zoom. I will call on each person who wishes to speak. Sandy, the co-chair, will monitor the Q&A, and Cody will also assist. Okay, once Sandy calls on someone to speak, Cody will unmute them and the timer will begin. So those of you wishing to speak will have 2 minutes to do so. Okay, all right.
Anne Greenberg, would you like to speak, or should we just read your question? Anne, are you there? Anne Greenberg?
I think she's left for another meeting.
So we could just maybe answer her questions. This is Stuytown, Peter Cooper Village is looking at a CHP to be installed under the floor of a garage. How is this allowable under the new rules?
Oscar, did you want me to take that? Okay, I will try anyway. If that's the case, then I mean, under Appendix G of the building code, I mean, that exists now before, any of this text amendment was to be introduced, that actually has to be dry flood proofed. So you can do that, but you have to go to the expense of dry flood proofing the level anything below the floodplain. And if that is mechanicals, then I mean, that's what the owner is volunteering to do by putting it in that location.
But basically, though, with this new text amendment, they could put it at grade level somewhere in Peter Cooper Village or Stuyvesant Town.
Yes, they could.
On
Yes.
grade. Which is maybe one of the negatives of this particular text amendment, that you could take over public space for mechanicals that have previously been sort of tucked away and hidden.
I wouldn't necessarily say it could be public space, but they could certainly put it in what was previously considered to be an open space that is required to be on the site. That is for the enjoyment of residents. Yes, you're correct.
So the open space requirement, mechanicals are allowed to be within your open space requirement for the site?
They would be classified as a permitted obstruction.
Permitted obstruction. Okay, thank you. We have Gail Accardi. Gail, would you like to speak, or should we read your question? Gail?
Hi. You can read my question. I just wanted to, add, I live in Stuyvesant Town, but I'm here mostly representing myself as a pedestrian who walks all over the city and who previously has fallen and broken a wrist because of debris on the sidewalks. So that's why I'm asking about these permitted obstructions and their impact on the sidewalks and pedestrian flow, especially with outdoor dining and tree vendors and numerous other things on the sidewalks these days.
So the permitted obstructions are for on-site use. So it's not for what will be in the public right of way or on the sidewalks. That's not what this is kind of permitting. The permitted obstruction will be on site.
So it has to be within the building property line to count, to be allowed?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not in the public pedestrian path at all then?
Yeah, I mean, we should certainly clarify that none of these rules are intended to be affecting the public right of way, be it sidewalks or streets or parks or open spaces or anything. This is entirely within private property, and it's trying to, give owners relief by where they can relocate certain things within their property. So by under no means would you see anything obstructing the sidewalk or any public way.
And Gail just gave a bit more information here that some of your illustrations do show infringements onto the sidewalks, walls and lifts, etc. So that may be a little bit misleading in the presentation. Next is Jen S. Murray. Oh, Jen S. from Murray Hill. Jen, would you like to speak? Or we can read your question. Jen, are you still on the call? So just to read.
Hi. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
So I don't need to say anything. You can just read the question for the sake of brevity.
Okay. Are there financial, material, bulk discounts, or other incentives for buildings or neighborhoods or managing agents to comply with the new text amendment? And if not, can text amendments be used as basis to create legislation or other revenue funding to help buildings pay for these improvements at a time when right now business, tenancy, commercial income is going down and cost rents are increasing?
So the incentives that are designed within the text amendment are limited to the height and the FAR, allowances, the exemptions that are included. This isn't, there are outside, other agencies and other, federal resources and, state resources for resiliency measurements that a lot of private owners can make use of. floodny.org is a resource for finding some of these financial resources, but the zoning amendment or the zoning resolution can't necessarily give financial incentives to do one thing or the other. The only incentives can be within the land use privy that the zoning, because the zoning can only be within the land use permissions.
Can I add to that also as one of the very early slides in Escr's presentation highlighted, the scope of the text amendment and what it can achieve is, in the grand scheme of the whole resiliency planning conversation across the city is quite slim. And really what we're talking about here is removing barriers to that are within the zoning resolution to achieving resiliency for private owners. So, I mean, the whole resiliency initiative of the city within itself is identified under 1 NYC. And the primary agency that deals with most of the mechanisms and the different strategies within that is the Mayor's Office of Resiliency. So, I mean, they certainly have financial incentives that work independent and to themselves, and how they work, I mean, is a little beyond Azka and I. But the extent to what this text amendment can actually achieve is really where it can incentivize people through floor area, and where they can actually, make back what they have spent on, say, dry flood proofing by capturing floor area somewhere else. The zoning resolution is not a place that we can start building in specific financial incentives, unfortunately.
I do have another question. I noticed that you're relaxing setbacks in some of the residential areas, but not the fire code or probably light and air requirements. So I'm just wondering if that will really be a benefit to some of these homeowners. You still need 30 feet for a viable window, is that correct?
So none of the proposal or anything that is in this text amendment goes against any of the fire code or any building code. This is actually just building on the building code. So it's not it's not going against anything that is in there. But can you clarify what you mean by
well, it's just in the text amendment, it notes that you can reduce your rear yard setback and your side yard setback, but you cannot relax any of the fire requirements. And my understanding is that also you would still need light and air, so that by relaxing some of these rules, I'm just wondering if they actually do, how they are meant to benefit the homeowner.
I will have to look at, Scott, do you have anything on that, particularly about setbacks?
I do not. I mean, the extent to which they would become relevant is really when a landowner is trying to relocate the bulk from their ground floor to somewhere else. So, or if they're trying to relocate plant and things like that. But that's probably something we would have to look into a little further for you on how those mechanisms are working. So we're happy to get back to you on that, Sandra.
That's actually, I just want to, I'm sorry, Adam, will you recognize me, please?
Yes.
Like, that's exactly the kind of issue. It's sort of an unintended consequence, is that, is this going to supersede, for instance, Sandy mentioned the light and air requirements, or will those requirements remain in place? And if they are, like, again, what benefits will the homeowner receive?
We can certainly get more information about how setbacks are, how they're measured and things, because I'm not too familiar with this, so I don't want to give you the wrong information here.
And it may not be applicable to our district,
but you are asking us to speak on something that does apply to the whole city. And I think, like, that's the bigger issue is, if there are allowances that are made here permitting some relaxing of this regulation, what other regulations?
Well, I mean, we can address this in the resolution in a couple minutes, for some of the main issues and concerns. It was my hope that our resolution would be, even though this has to address the broader city, that would speak mostly to the immediate concerns of the district. Okay. And so, okay.
And we have no other questions from the public, unless this is sort of a last chance if there's anyone who would like to.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So members of the, if you were
one last question popped up.
Okay,
sorry.
great.
Fran Silverberg. Again, should I read the question or?
Yeah, go ahead and read the question, Sandy.
Okay. This is about flood resiliency. My concern as a Stuytown resident is that management here is using this as an opportunity to build CHP plants, adding even more pollution to this area. Basically, this is going to benefit them monetarily and reduce the quality of air. Again, one of those maybe unintended consequences of this particular amendment.
Hi, this is Fran speaking. I don't quite have a question here, and you did say this is one of those unintended consequences. And maybe the question is what area of the city we need to take this to look at it environmentally, so that we look at this whole thing collectively in our area, being right near the Con Ed plant, and then having these two other plants built here. Does anybody have an answer for that?
So as part of a text amendment project, the department does have to conduct an environmental review. And I mean, one of the considerations of that is cumulative air quality. Whether the outcome you're talking about, where a particular type of equipment could be built by a private landowner that could increase pollution, I'm not sure if that would have been taken in by it, because it kind of sounds like that it's the type of equipment we would probably discourage anyway. But I mean, that's kind of I guess a potential consequence, and again, we'd be happy to look into that a little further for you, because I mean, it's quite a technical question.
Yes, and also we'll get more information on that. However, I also want to emphasize again that any private property owner who will be using this text to use that mechanical permitted obstruction aspect of it, it's really just relocating existing mechanical. So it's not meant to, create a power plant or create additional, pollution or anything that wouldn't already exist on the building. It's really just about the location of where that mechanical equipment is, whether it's internally in the building or if it's outside in an open space. So, just wanted to clarify that, but we can get more information about the technicality of this project if you would like.
Great.
And if I could just ask, who enforces that? Is that the Department of Buildings that knows if it's a relocated piece of equipment? Are they the ones who are going to be monitoring that?
Yes, when an owner files plans to undertake any of that kind of work, the Department of Buildings oversees, how that mechanical actually relates to the site. So, I mean, if it's, I think that the suggestion was that this is the kind of plant that is not necessary on the site. And I mean, if that's the case, then the Department of Buildings would be having a look at their request for permits and coming to the conclusion that this is unnecessary mechanical equipment. But I mean, if it is indeed necessary for some sort of function of the buildings on site, then yes, they would be assessing where it's able to go under this text and how.
Great, thanks. Sandra?
Sorry, I just wanted to follow up on that, Scott. So I don't think that's accurate, right? So GOB would actually review any sort of mechanical submission on its own merit, but they wouldn't be looking at this necessarily to determine whether it was an appropriately sized or oversized replacement and addition project, right? I mean, that's not something that doesn't seem to really be in the DOB's
right, that would
site.
be DCP, right?
So, I mean, as I understood, the inference there was that this was some sort of irrelevant type infrastructure that didn't have anything to do with the buildings on the sites. And I mean, if that's the case, then there's certainly a level of scrutiny that happens there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a little bit more nuanced, right? So if you have a current capacity for a building or multiple buildings, and you're building additional capacity, potentially creating additional environmental impact. I don't see that as something that DOB would, as normal course of business, actually be in the process of evaluating. And I would agree with what Anne said. It seems like this is kind of more in the zoning text, DCP kind of wheelhouse.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree with you. I don't think DOB would be looking at the exact specifics of whether this, 20% increase in the
Right.
size or capacity of this, particular generator, if it is indeed relevant to the site, which I think is what you're suggesting there. So, I mean, in that respect, I would be happy to, consider any comments you had on how that could be actually regulated.
That's
because
my
I think
concern.
that's something.
I don't think it's actually going to be regulated.
Well, and I think this is
But-
something that was covered within the mechanical voids debate that was had quite comprehensively through the city of really how big is enough mechanical space. And I mean, I don't think we necessarily have an answer to that, but we have, I guess, an idea of what is reasonable from the outcome of that process. But yeah, I mean, whether it actually addresses what the question was of whether they can build a CHP plant on this site, I'm not too sure if that's going to answer that question. So, I mean, if this is something you want to put in your comments, by all means, we're certainly looking to try and plug any unintended consequences if there is any. Or otherwise, I mean, if there's a specific clarification there that we can get back to you on, I mean, also happy to do that.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. I think we will be doing that.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, I think with that said, okay. Sandy, did you have one more question or?
No, that's all of the public questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So with that said, we're going to close public comment. Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much for the responses. Team, where, if there's sort of additional sort of follow-up or emails or questions like that, where should members of the community direct their questions?
Adam, you can forward any of the questions that might come out of this, or if the community sends anything to you, to me and Scott.
Great, thank you. Okay, all right, and so essentially with that, we've heard a lot of great comments. I think there's some outstanding questions specifically related to our district. So, it is within our right to comment via resolution, on this presentation, on this particular zoning amendment. So I open to the floor of the committee to sort of discuss different ideas of a resolution that we would like to shape. Okay. So does anybody want to start or? Okay, Anne, I see your hand.
So I've got a couple of thoughts. One is, I think, the great minutes that we're going to get out of this are going to help us shape it. I mean, there have certainly been a bunch of issues raised that we want to ensure that are addressed. I also wonder if we can't get any sort of more professional help on a review of this from, an urban planner that, George or, like the borough president, if there's hearing what other community boards are thinking about this. I don't know if it came up at borough board, but I think this is citywide and it's very complex. And so I think there are a lot of places, in addition to what we've heard tonight, where we might want to pull stuff in. And I will not volunteer to write the reso, but I will volunteer to help edit it.
Okay, great. I mean, it could be very short, it could be, we agree, or We disagree.
I'm not going to be really happy with one saying we agree.
Yeah.
I feel like I would be happy with a reso that says, I think this is a great idea. Here are issues we want to make sure you are taking into consideration.
And that's traditionally what we've done before in the past.
Exactly.
Sandra, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to manipulate the conversation here. I mean, I think, you know, we've had several people speak to it. I'm very concerned about the permitted obstruction allowances in open spaces and what that could do to a good portion of our community, to be perfectly frank. I'm also quite concerned with the allowed support space changes, which I think is also part of goal 3, if I remember correctly. I think there's some significant impact to our community here. And I definitely would consider or recommend to the committee that that we consider a resolution of general support, but with some strong caveats. And I'd be happy to work with Anne and whoever else on crafting some of that language.
Okay, great. Jean, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Sandra said, because I think that Anne raised an excellent point about unintended consequences. And I think Sandra zeroed in on what some of those specific consequences would be within our district, and specifically within Peter Cooper and Stuyvesant Town. So I think, yeah, general reso of support with some very specific caveats about what it is that these unintended consequences might result in our district would be probably the best way to go in terms of writing a resolution.
Okay, I would agree.
And if I could just, I think we need to address in some way the East Coast Resiliency Project and how that is going to impact us and potentially, do we need, you know, we're going to follow this zoning amendment in the future because hopefully we're not in the floodplain. I'm not exactly sure what we put into the amendment to our concerns, but I think we do have to address it.
Absolutely. So
do we still have access to like professional urban planning from George Janes or anybody else, Cody?
So we still have George on retainer. We replenished his retainer at the end of last fiscal year. I think the timeline here to get a memo from George and respond to this ULURP by the deadline would be quite challenging. George normally takes a few weeks to produce something, especially on something of this magnitude. And I don't have the deadline in front of me, but if I remember when we were planning this out, in terms of scheduling, you needed to vote on this by your December meeting in order, at December's full board in order to meet the deadline to submit your comment within the 60 days. It's a 60-day window, right, Scott and Aska?
Yes, that's correct. So the deadline is until December 28th.
It's a shame because he's been, you know, really helpful, I think, in you know, framing some issues for us in the past. So I don't know, Adam, if you think it's worth seeing if we can just get him to take a kind of first look and see if there's anything we're missing here, you know, in time to do that with the rest of writing the reso.
I mean, we can definitely certainly ask, but to echo Cody's point, I think it's going to be a really tight turnaround. So we can, I mean, we can always ask. And
Adam, you know, other boards use him as well, and I know they're all talking about this, so I imagine that he may be very familiar with this already.
That's good.
Yeah.
And it seems to me we have some very specific items that we would like him to, you know, look at. So maybe if he's doing so in conjunction with other boards, it might be a doable ask. Kavitha, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just to kind of riff off that, I think we could just maybe draft something and have him review it alongside. You know, that way we're kind of getting started with all the things we already know we're concerned about, and just make sure we're not missing anything, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. And so I guess with that said, do I have a motion for a motion for a resolution? Sounds like in general for support of the proposed rezoning, but with with listed concerns and issues and caveats.
I'll move that.
Second.
Second, thank you. Okay, Cody, how should we take the vote?
Sorry, we'll do it by roll call. Just one moment.
Okay.
Okay, committee members, I will call your name and you can say in favor, against, abstain, or not entitled. Jim Collins, Jim has not joined, right? Okay, Adam Hartke.
In favor, support.
Sandy McKee.
In favor.
All right, Kavitha Matthew.
In favor.
Okay, great. Wells Magali.
In favor.
All right. Gene Santoro.
In favor.
Larry Shire.
In favor.
Ann Seligman.
In favor.
Lou Sapersky.
In favor.
Sandro Sherrod. Is Sandro having an audio issue again?
I think so. He did second the motion though, so.
Yes, so Letty Simon.
In favor.
Has Kathy Thompson joined us? Don't see so. Molly Hollister.
Aye.
Okay. Sandro, were you able to resolve the? Is he still here?
Yeah, he's there. I think he's diligently trying to figure out his sound.
Okay. Well, without Sandra's vote, it's still 10 in favor, no opposed, no abstention, no not entitled. So we can record Sandra's vote after.
Excellent. Okay. So do I have any volunteers to write this resolution? One or multiple people? Anne said she would help proofread.
No, edit, not
No.
proofread.
Not proofread? Okay.
No, edit.
Edit. Okay.
There's a difference. That's why I'm an editor, not a proofreader.
There you go. This was your first test. Okay. So, all right. Don't everybody jump up at once. All right. So I'll go ahead and start writing some text. I'll work with Anne via the editing process. Kavitha.
Sorry, I lost audio. I did say earlier that I would also help draft.
Excellent, excellent, Sandra. Kavitha.
I was going to help since I'm doing the minutes anyway, but I'll help you guys now at this point.
Okay, great. I can just send out the email. I can let you guys work your magic. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the DCP team. It was very informative. Thank you. I think we learned a lot, and look forward to hearing back from you soon on this and a myriad of other topics. So if we don't see you before then, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Oscar. Great job. Thanks, Scott.
Great to see you all. Thanks again, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 2 of our agenda, the ESCR updates. Okay, the Department of Design and Construction will be updating us on the status of the Eastside Coastal Resiliency. Q Amari from DDC will be leading the presentation, as in past months. All right, Q, where's yours?
Good evening, everyone. Actually, I'm going to introduce one of our colleagues and wanted to take this moment to thank my team, but also make sure that everybody on this board and meeting is familiar with our team members here before we start. So Desiree Gazzo is part of our HNTB Liro team that we've brought on board the whole team of HNTB Liro joint venture since last year, and slowly but surely we got them all on board. They've done an amazing, tremendous job helping us navigate through the past several months of procurement phase, and now we're going into construction, and we're going to heavily rely on their expertise to help us get through this unprecedented, massive project construction. With that, we're going to slowly have these experts with us at a lot of these meetings as we move forward, and wanted to make sure that everybody is familiar with them. Feel free to, we're still all available at DDC. Feel free to reach out to us, but also our team members from HNTB Liro are also available. So I'm going to hand it off to Desiree and John Lynch and the rest of the team. Nadine as a CCL, everybody's here to walk you guys through all sorts of updates and news that we have, and we'll be sure to come back as committed every month. We'll continue our coordination with everyone. Desiree?
Thanks, Q. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Great, sorry. And I will say thank you, Q, very much. I would typically have my video on, however, I'm in a low bandwidth location, so unfortunately it's not going to work today. But thank you, Q, for the introduction. Hello, CB6. I'm very happy to be here tonight to give an update on the Eastside Coastal Resiliency project. And I just noticed that we should say construction update because now we have entered the construction time period. So Leah, you could please switch to the next slide. Great. So I'd like to start off with our highlight slide. And the Astrolevy facilities that just began construction, we do have an update from the Parks Department that both the handball and track areas will remain open. There was the coordination that occurred this past week and the end of last week, and we have verified that we will be able to keep the track area open. Parks, Alda, do you have anything to add to that, or should we move to the next highlight?
No, but just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that that is something that we have worked out with the DDC team, and wanted to thank everyone for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you. And then there have been a few questions about the soil test data in past community board meetings. So as when we get to the next slide, you'll see several links. However, we've included the links to the FEIS and the EIS where the soil test data is in fact located. And then for those of you who are not familiar with the DDC process, DDC does send mass mailings, which include the contract drawings for each of the projects when the contractor is selected. So the mass mailing for PA2 was sent to the elected officials and community boards, and then the same will happen when the other projects come on board, mass mailings for PA1 and for PC. We have a few updates which we'll get into, and then John Lynch will talk about the construction updates, and then we have Trang Bui, our Section 3 MWBE consultant, who will present the Section 3 and MWBE section a little bit differently than we have in the past. And this was presented at the last CB3 meeting in pretty great detail. And today we'd like to focus on the construction, the PA2 construction. So Trang is going to just breeze through those slides. However, we have them there for reference and certainly will answer any questions that you have. So as mentioned, here are a few links on the soil test data. So you could take a look at those, and please feel free to reach out should there be any questions. However, this is where kind of all of the information is held. So our website updates, I hope everyone's had an opportunity to check out the updated website. We did add a Meet Your CCL section. We've recently posted our advisories and bulletins that you've received in the past few weeks up on the construction notices page shown here. And then there's also the Work With Us resources, which have links to the MWBE in Section 3. As we've been receiving questions from you via the inquiry tool, we've been updating our FAQ section. So please take a look there. And again, we will continue to update that as we receive more questions. We also have included a link to the New York City Parks neighborhood recreation resources on our cover page. Leah, if you want to advance. Perfect. So if you go to the home page, there are several kind of quick links once you scroll down a bit, and the Parks Neighborhood Recreational Resources is there, and it will bring you directly to the New York City Parks website, and you could browse through the interactive map of recreational resources. So just to familiarize everybody with the kind of advisories or the communications materials that we have sent out in the past 2 or so weeks. The first one was the community advisory that announced the work beginning in the PA2 project area around Astrolevy Playground and in the Solar One facility. So community advisories will be issued as needed depending on the work that's going on for the project. So milestone activities or certain shutoffs, et cetera, will be kind of blasted through a community advisory. The CCL in any project, again, for us, it's Nadine on board. So she will be kind of handing them out on site at certain points through the project, and we will also post them on site as necessary. The construction bulletin on the left, that is distributed weekly. So the CCL, again, Nadine here, will coordinate with the construction team to get the week's look ahead for the following week, and then we will post to the website and distribute via the inquiry tool stakeholder database. So if you do want to receive the project updates, please make sure you head to the website and sign up for notifications. So I'm going to hand the mic over to John Lynch from our HNTB Lero team, who is managing the project area 2.
Okay, thanks, Desiree. Everyone can hear me, I assume? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Desiree. My name's John Lynch. I've been here before. I'm the senior construction manager for the PA2 contract, working with DDC Construction on the administration of this contract. So I'm just going to give a brief update. A lot of these slides we've probably seen before. This is the project area overview slide that just shows the PA2 contract, which is in construction as of November 16th, when the notice to proceed was given. You can go to the next slide. Wait a second. Did we go backwards there? Sorry. Yeah. Go to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, so project area 2, like I said, notice to proceed was given on November 16th. We have a contractor on board. So, and the first areas of work will be Astrolevy Playground and the Solar One area. Astrolevy Playground, they were putting up fencing to close the park, keeping open the track and handball courts as stated. And then the next area will be Solar One. We're still working out the details on where that fencing is going to be with our contractor. We go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, great, thanks. So anticipated schedule, upon notice to proceed, we're going to see submittals from our contractor. And so this is just kind of a timeline of what's going to happen in November and December. As I said, we'll have fencing around the Astrolevy Park. We had a walkthrough with Parks, I guess a week and a half ago. And then Solar One area where we're going to build the flood wall there. We're working out that. When Solar One closes the bikeway, we'll be rerouting the greenway signs for the bike bikes coming from the north and south. Submittal reviews. We're doing test pits for utilities, and then some demolition activities in the park because it gets all new amenities. And that'll continue into December. We have engineers field office, air monitoring equipment installation. We're very cognizant of the COVID for both our field office and the workers out in the field. So we're working closely with DDC Construction to make sure we maintain a safe work environment. We can go to the next slide. Okay, this is just a graphic showing Astrolevy Park and the areas that are open and closed. You can see where the access is from 25th Street to utilize those facilities. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Hold on. Tagging along here. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about Solar One. A little bit of the fencing has gone in, but we're still finalizing where the fencing is going to go. So we're coordinating for pedestrian access. We will not close the greenway before Thanksgiving. Our contractor's still reevaluating how they're going to do all that work, and we'll issue an advisory in advance of the bikeway closing down. Okay, this is just, we've seen this slide before, I think, but this is just the idea of having phased construction. So we're allowing access to Astrolevy Park in 2020, Stuyvesant Cove in 2021, and then Murphy Brothers Playground in 2022. So that we don't close all the parks at the same time. And Stuyvesant Cove Park itself is going to be phased half at a time. So that way we keep half that park open at all times to complete the wall and parks. Open park areas will have supported amenities, and we'll have safe pedestrian access maintained to all open areas, including access to the ferry during this phase construction. Okay, we can go to the next slide. This we saw before. This is just the construction start advisory, which Desiree talked about before. And I think the next one's the bulletin. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, the construction bulletins, which are weekly. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So yeah, Desiree mentioned we have Nadine Harris on as our community construction liaison. So she's out there regularly and posting these advisories in advance of work. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Leah. All right, now just a quick update on Project Area 1. This is the big park, the East River Park, and then it'll have to be registered and then go to awarded to proceed. So, okay, this is just the showing the East River Park.
John, it sounds like you're breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure if other people are hearing that, but
he's breaking up a lot. It was totally unintelligible.
Okay, I'm not the only one. John, are you still there? Otherwise, I could.
I think he might have dropped off.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, I mean, I could take over until he
Desiree, can you hear me?
Oh, there you go.
Here we go.
Yeah, I sat through like an hour and a half, no problem, and then as soon as I start speaking, it gets dropped out. So sorry about that, people. Anyway, I'm not sure when I dropped off, but this Project Area 1, we can go to the next slide. That was unfortunate. I apologize. Okay, so just we've seen some of these slides before. So right now we're currently in progress of taking the bids from the contractors. We've gotten questions from contractors, and bids are going to come in December. And then after that, we go through this registration process and an award. and then comptroller approval, and then notice to proceed. So you can just advance this. I think there's another bubble in there. Yeah, so just want to highlight East River Park will remain open for the rest of 2020. And then the first closures will be in early 2021. And that park is phased to keep about half of it open at all times with amenities. We can go to the next slide. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back to Desiree for community engagement and Section 3 MWBE. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. So just a reminder in the community outreach during construction process, with any updates we have, we first reach out to our elected officials, then we notify the CAG and the community boards, and then we push the notifications through the CCL's website, social medias, etc. And then while that is happening, we have this ongoing Section 3 and MWBE outreach. Trang will speak a little bit to that. Again, the contractor just recently came on board, so now is when we will be starting the conversations with him. And like I said, Trang will talk us through a little bit those kind of steps in the Section 3 and MWBE outreach.
Thanks, Desiree. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Again, Trang Bowie from Bowie Studio, and we're an MWBE and Section 3 firm based in the Lower East Side. So this is an updated slide with the sequence for outreach of where we are right now. And as John and Desiree mentioned, the contractor just came on board now. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll be starting to look at their MWBE utilization plan and their Section 3 plan for recruitment and hiring. And we'll be starting to post updates on positions and procurement opportunities, if any, come out of these meetings. Next slide. So this is an updated slide on the Section 3 requirements. We've gotten a few inquiries on the details of exactly what the requirements are and how Section 3 firms and Section 3 hiring is defined. So I just wanted to drill down a little bit more on this. All 4 contracts of the current projects are HUD funded, so they are all subject to the Section 3 goals. And in the past, we've focused a lot on the requirement for 30% of all new hires be Section 3 individuals, but there are also 2 other components of the goals, and that's for non-construction contracts, 3%. There's a 3% goal of going to Section 3 businesses, and then for construction contracts, 10% are targeted for Section 3 businesses. And as a clarification, the Section 3 requirement is not an entitlement program, so there are no guarantees. When we post positions and procurement opportunities, they will have the same requirements and minimum qualifications for individuals and firms to make sure that they could perform the work and have the ability and capacity for the project or the positions. But we can, however, help foster an environment where we can make sure that if we know there are opportunities that require certain training or background or certifications, we can work with local resources, recruitment partners to see what kind of training they're already offering, or if we need to supplement it based on their pool of contractors or past performance or obstacles. We can work on that to make sure we have we cultivate as many potential leads and hiring individuals in the local community as we can. We're very committed to making these goals, and part of the process of recruitment is also job training and contracting opportunities. So we can prepare individuals and firms to make sure there's that they're prepared to respond to these bids as they come up. Next slide. I think you've seen these before. They're just definitions on how firms are considered Section 3 businesses and income ranges for Section 3 individuals. Next slide. And on our outreach events and communications for MWBE, we'll be working with DDC's Office of Diversity and Industry Relations. They have a very robust program with existing mailing lists and industry relationships and relationships with other agency partners. So we will work and coordinate with them on events and email blasts for future hiring and procurement opportunities. And on the new website that we've posted, there is a section for working with us that you could click on under the contact tab. Next slide. These are just more Section 3 resources if you wanted to get more details. And the first link actually takes you to the New York City site to explain how the Section 3 rolls up into city projects that receive funding from HUD. Next slide. You've also seen these before. These are other MWB resources. And then on the next slide, we have events, and one of the largest MWB events is coming up in the first week of December, and registration closes this Wednesday. HNTB has also finished their 3-part webinar on how to do business with them. And the link on our website will give you access to these events recordings. And then lastly, there's a link to NYCHA's opportunities page, so individuals and firms can look at resources and opportunities that are available there. And I think that takes us to the last slide, Desiree.
Yep, thank you, Trang. So that's our presentation for this evening. Again, if you need more information, you can visit us at the website. And if you have any questions, you can use the inquiry tool. Again, please have patience with that. You know, a lot of the questions that are being asked right now, since we have not started construction, do require some multi-agency coordination. So we are trying to get the best answers to everyone. Once we enter construction, the questions and answers will potentially be more straightforward. So we thank you all for using that. And Cody, we could open it to questions.
Great, thank you, DDC team. So what we'll do what we did before. We'll have the committee ask questions, members of the committee ask questions, then we'll open it to the public. I see there's already one Q&A so far. So I'll go ahead and start. Thank you very much to the committee and to those who are listening. If you haven't already, you know, like Desiree pointed out, you know, please visit the ESDR website and do sign up for these alerts. They're extremely helpful. They come out once a week, and they really give you a good idea of what's going on. Like she was just saying, you know, this is a very complex project, understatement, but you know, it involves extreme coordination, and there's a lot of moving parts constantly. And so being in the loop is really, really helpful, and I think these do mostly do a good job. However, with that said though, team, if you could in future sort of email blasts like that, be very explicit and clear, and you know, and to be frank, sort of hold the hand of your audience in terms of these updates. You know, we're really glad and thankful that, you know, the Astrolevy sort of track and the handball card are still going to be open. But there was a lot of confusion over the last week. And I think a way to potentially avoid issues like that is if you could potentially sort of redesign the email, and maybe bullet out some things of that nature, to where you explicitly say what's going to be open and what's going to be closed. And also to, for future closures or detours or things of that nature, you know, weeks, if possible, I think would go a long way for the community. And I guess my last comment to that too, and this is a design quibble, is that, so if you click on the actual the street closures or detours thing, it takes you straight to the Do It ArcGIS page that gives you the entirety of the 5 boroughs. If there's a way that you can really specifically hone down, you know, the project area as a whole, I think that would go a long way, because like, when you see it, I deal with this data a lot. It's extremely overwhelming, you know, and somebody who's on your site who doesn't deal with GIS data, you know, at all, they just kind of throw their hands up in the air and just sort of walk away. And so with that, that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam. No, we'll consider all that. We'll definitely take a look at the GIS link. Again, I think once we actually get into construction a bit more, it will be much easier to provide more detailed updates on what exactly will be happening. The beginning of this project, there's just been kind of a lot of coordination, and the contractor wants to get going quickly, and obviously he just received notice to proceed. So we've been trying to provide accurate, I think that's the key word, is we're trying to provide accurate information and not, make sure that everything has been coordinated before blasting it out. So thank you again for everyone's patience, and we will try and provide more detailed information.
Excellent, thanks. All right, so we're going to turn the floor over to Jean, and then it'll be Anne, and then Larry.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. As always, every month we look forward to seeing you and finding out what's going on. I do have a question because I'm confused about the timeline that you're talking about the Greenway. Now, you said you're closing the Greenway after Thanksgiving, immediately after Thanksgiving, something like that?
Yeah, this is John.
John, it would be for you, yes.
Yeah, we're coordinating with EDC on that for the contractor to gain access. So that's why we said after Thanksgiving, because it's not going to happen before then. But we are coordinating with EDC and Solar One to get access to the site, so our contractor can put fencing up there. So I don't have an exact time frame because I think the lawyers have to talk to each other to address just having access around the building.
Yeah, there's a few other conversations that I think have to take place as well. And one of them is exactly what the detour, you were talking about putting up signage, rerouting signage and advisories and stuff like that. Now, the Transportation Committee at CB6 hasn't even met yet with DOT about exactly what that detour is, the rerouting is going to be. We have that meeting on December 7th. So I'm assuming that none of this is going to be happening before then. Is that true? Hello, John?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. I mean, we are working with our contractor to allow them to gain access to the Solar One area, at which point they want to close it off, and then that would close the bikeway.
Uh-huh. They've already got Jersey barricades up along the northern, about quarter to a third of the park, and
Right.
have rerouted the bikes and all that stuff, and they put fencing on top of the Jersey barricades. So you're
that's
planning
great.
on closing down the entire thing at some point, whether or not we know what's going on with the rerouting.
Yeah, I mean, we have to get access to the site, and then we have to make a determination on if we're closing the bikeway, but are we going to allow pedestrians to pass through there safely, so that they can still access the waterfront down the east side, right?
Yeah, and John, if I could just jump in. So, Jean, there was a detour for the bikeway. If you're talking about the bikeway specifically, there is a detour, an approved detour in the mass mailing and the construction documents. So that detour is just being finalized at this moment. So there will be an advisory issued once the detour has been approved. And we will again blast that out and provide that to elected officials, community board members, et cetera, in advance of the closure of the bikeway.
So
right. Those signs are being installed now. They're just going to be covered until the bikeway actually gets closed.
Uh-huh. So our input into this is what?
Irrelevant.
Excuse me?
She said irrelevant.
Oh, sorry, Ann. I missed it. That's why I asked what you said. Irrelevant seems to be it. Well, then I'm not quite sure what to say because we haven't seen anything. We haven't been asked. I don't know where these plans were approved from. And we do have this meeting set up, which DOT is going to present to us what they're proposing to do on December 7th.
Sure.
So-
Hi,
Gene?
hi guys. If
May
I
I
can jump in. This is
suggest-
Neg from DOT.
May I
Um,
suggest that you guys go back and talk with DOT about what their plans are that they're
DOT 's
presenting to us on December
Neg
7th?
Neg from DOT is trying to jump in.
Okay, thank you.
Or he went on mute.
Yeah, no, sorry. Hi guys. This is Neg from DOT. To speak to your question about the Transportation Committee next month, we do plan to come and present the proposed Avenue C protected bike lane. That was a promised commitment that DOT had done, had put together as part of the Greenway closure. Again, that's a standalone DOT project that's going to address some of the cyclists that are going to be, who would be rerouted from the Greenway. And we've heard loud and clear about avenues, First and Second Avenues having a lot of existing volume. So in terms of the coordination with ESCR and just to ensure that we wanted to make sure that we present that at the Transportation Committee. That's a little bit separate from the detour I think that John is talking to, which doesn't take that into account. This is a proposed bike lane that's we're hoping to implement it this spring. And again, I'll let the bike unit give into a little bit more detail when they have their presentation.
And Neg, if I may, sorry guys, this is Jennifer Santinez from the Manhattan DOT office. I was also having a little bit of trouble with my sound just a second ago. So just to add on to what Neg had just mentioned, Jean, I know that I had reached out to Cody about presenting and confirming our presentation on the Avenue C project for the upcoming TC meeting, Transportation Committee meeting on December 7th. I just want to further clarify and underscore Neg's points that we're coming to present on a project that will help provide additional detour options during ESCR construction. And so this is our proposal for a permanent expansion of the bike lane network in this area. And so we're hoping to get your feedback on that. And then as John had mentioned, we're working closely with them to further confirm the details of the detour. And then we'll be in touch with the community board when we have more to share.
Okay, I guess that's the way it'll be then. I appreciate the clarification about Avenue C and its relevance. It sounds to me, if I could just ask one more question, that for about 6 months then, between now and the spring sometime, we will not have some remediation on Avenue C for bikers or anybody else. It'll just be someplace else like First and Second Avenue.
That's what that's what it's looking like. We're really interested in sharing this proposal to the committee next week, or I guess in a week and a half, and so we'll be able to share more at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
And Anne?
Sorry, I'm permanently unmute. Because I have to say, I raised my hand because I took the minutes last month. So I looked at what questions, there were 4 main questions that we kind of asked that were captured in the minutes, and 2 of them were addressed. And the other 2 that were not addressed, one of them was specifically this issue of the rerouting of cyclists and pedestrians. And so I gotta say, I'm just really disappointed that you did not address it in the presentation. I'm sorry, this is like the sound of my head exploding again. And that, we have to, again, push on you to say, like, this is something the committee and the board really cares about, maintaining this continuity. And it looks like, we're just going to lose. Like, everybody's just going to have to go over to First Avenue. And that's not great. So, thanks for that. So that's one thing. And the second thing that you didn't address that we heard both from members of the community and from board members were about security issues and sort of safety issues. And again, I looked at the minutes from last month, and you know, it was one of the things that you said, you know, we'll get back to you on this next month. And have you done anything? And I'm sorry, I know you guys are working really hard, but you come to us to hear our concerns and you say you'll come back with answers. What are the answers? So have you spoken to the contractors? Have you looked at the issues? So the other question is about security issues in the areas where you're doing this.
Sure. Thanks, Anne. For the, for just to speak to, again, the rerouting of the cyclists and pedestrians, I think DOT did, a great job of kind of responding to that in the last question. And that is something that we are working with the contractor on. And, the contractor just did notice to proceed on the 16th. So we've only had a small window of coordination with the contractor on these types of issues. They had to submit plans. We reviewed, they're under review, and we are, in coordination with, keeping the pedestrian connections and et cetera. So that is the update at this point. And as soon as that is, as soon as we do work through that, then we will again send out an advisory with a map and what those, what the outcome of that was. So we are working towards that. For security issues and safety issues, John, I'm going to punt that to you. I know the contractor has,
the contractor has to submit a site safety plan for his contract, so that's been submitted. So, we're out there as the construction managers watching the construction, making sure they work in a safe manner. That's an ongoing thing. That's, as we start to put fences up and create work zones, we have to work in a safe manner. So
no. I'm not. I do actually really appreciate that you are talking, that you are being so careful with staff during COVID. I'm talking more about the concerns people have with squatters in sites like that, which came up, as you know, last month.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
how are you working? How are you working with DHS and NYPD to make sure that those spaces are safe?
That's a good question, and I think that's something that we're going to need to address as we ramp up. We just started, but we're going to be on top of that.
Okay, that's what you said last month.
Okay. Well, we hadn't started construction last month, but we just started it last week. So.
All right. Thank you, Larry. You have your hand raised.
Yes. Last month, I raised the issue on this particular point, making the suggestion, which really is not surprising, that cameras could be used to continually monitor the site so that, one, you could protect the public from squatters and what activities might be threatening to them, and also you can protect your own material from theft. So there was the cameras, and I just want to remind you that that is still a suggestion. Number two, going back to the discussion about access to what is going to be a reworking of the Greenway route. I attended the meeting of Community Board 3 Transportation Committee when I brought up the issue of, well, where were you going to bring the bicycles with respect to the construction north of 14th Street. And the big open question was, what happens between 18th Street and 20th Street, which is as far as the plan is going to go, what we're going to see on the 7th. I would like to make a suggestion here that the area under the FDR Drive, which will be used in large part for construction laydown area, the part that would be secured by cameras, could be reserved in part, and in small part, maybe 10 feet wide, to have a bike route or walkway that would parallel the existing bike path that will be closed for the construction of the wall. And if you did that, you wouldn't have to take away any lanes of traffic north of 18th Street to 20th Street. And that might be workable, particularly in the first part of the project when you're not going to be performing construction south of 20th Street. Whether this routing could also be continued north of 20th Street to 23rd Street, I'd like you to take a look at that, because that would certainly be attractive to everybody who currently uses the Greenway and isn't going to force them on a mile-long detour over to 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue. So you don't have to respond to that right now. I wanted to bring up another issue that also came up last month, and that is with respect to your relationships with the Solar One people. We had a resolution going forward because we were concerned about the two projects not going forward in tandem. And so would you enlighten us as to where things stand, as far as you know, as to how that project is going to proceed in tandem with your project?
So as far as, this is John, this as far as Solar One constructing a new building, or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So our
Larry,
colleague
I think
Casey jumped off, and we cannot answer questions pertaining to Solar One. That falls under EDC's wheelhouse. So we can take this back to them and follow up. But yeah, he had to jump off, but he was on the.
Adam, didn't we get the memo saying basically that they were gonna be back in sync?
Yes. So they said that they essentially were going to be back in sync and the lawyers were going to work everything out. But so basically what Larry was saying was that the T's been crossed and the I's been dotted.
Okay, but we only got the Solar One's point of view from Chris. I'm just going to ask for confirmation from DDC that with regard to construction going forward, that that is indeed the case.
For the SR project?
Can I jump in, guys? I'm sorry, this is Q from DDC. So Larry, really good points and concerns, and you as well. I can just quickly want to address a couple of the points that came up. So going backwards, Solar One, as of now, as far as we know at DDC, the funds for the projects, which were apparently were approved to begin with, but went on hold or paused, they got unpaused or unfrozen in a way, so the project can move forward. However, there's no schedule yet for that project, and John can talk about how we're coordinating our construction for that particular piece of the flood wall. But the bigger goal in a very, very overly simplified way is that DDC and construction team and contractor, they're going to get in there, construct that piece of the wall, and get out as quickly as they can, so they can leave that space clear for Solar One's construction when that starts.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Q.
Yeah, so that's where we are right now. Once Solar One's design picks back up again and they start moving towards their construction start, which is going to be in the near future, and down in the road in the future, that's when we'll have to all sort of huddle back again with our contractor, with John's team, with everybody to make sure that we're all coordinated and not in a way getting in each other's way.
Yeah, we
So
want to
there's-
finish the heavy flood wall construction before they come in and build a new structure there. So that's the intent of ESCR.
So let me ask a quick question here. The loose end that was kind of dangled at the end of our conversation with Chris was that they were not withdrawing their cease and desist letter until they were satisfied that their needs would be accommodated. And one would assume that that is resolved among the lawyers if you're actually going to be doing construction. If not, there are going to be problems that we don't want to hear about.
Right. Well, the EDC rep, Ophelia said the EDC rep is off, so we'll have to follow up to see.
Yeah, Will Fisher had to apologize. He texted me before our presentation even started. He had to leave by 7:30 or 45. And I promised that I'll take back questions for him to coordinate with him and get back to you folks. So
right.
That's all being coordinated with EDC and Solar One, and I think for the most part the issue has been resolved. I saw some good news last week, but
not resolved until the lawyers say it is. So
yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. So let me circle back with EDC and Will, and we'll let you know what the result is.
Okay, I'm happy to shine a spotlight on that to get you focused so that you can move ahead without any interruption. And then finally, I just wanted to make a very simple and hopefully very easy request. And that is that when you have signs that you are proposing to put up in this area, that you show them to us and by extension to the larger community. You could give us a slide here, and that would be very helpful. For example, we spoke on many occasions about supplemental ferry directional guidance signage. And if you have something that you are proposing to put up now at the outset of the project that will alert the community to the fact that the ferry landing is going to be operational throughout the entire course of the project, despite how things look on the ground, I would really like to see what it would look like and where you're going to put these additional signs.
We'll take that into consideration, Lawrence. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you, Larry. So I'm going to call on Jean next, and then I'm going to move to the two questions that we have from the public.
Adam, I'm sorry, if you don't mind, I just wanted to go back to what Ann and also Larry had brought up really quickly, that with regards to security, apologies for backtracking.
No worries.
Security and sort of the issue in that area, we'll take this back to our colleagues at City Hall and make sure that we get looped in, connected to DHS and see what we can do. I think just as standard practice within the agency at DDC, we typically notify Department of Homeless Services and the relevant City Hall folks to make sure that they're aware that construction is happening within a certain area for our projects. But I'll touch base with them again and make sure that we have some update for you guys on that end.
Great, thank you. Gene, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just want to go back to Larry's first point about taking some of the space under the FDR in the staging area of the construction site, because this is a solution that some of us have been discussing and offering and proposing for somewhere between 1 year and 2 years to various entities around the city, as well as talking among ourselves. And I would strongly urge DOT, DDC, and EDC between now and December 7th to maybe huddle on that particular focus and see if they can come up with a solution. The other part of that is that if in fact DOT has a plan, as I've seen too, that to go up to 20th Street with the protected bike lane on Avenue C, perhaps they should sharpen their pencils and go back and figure out a way to get it up to 23rd Street and 25th Street so that we can rejoin the Greenway north of the shutdown area. We've done our own counts about bike and pedestrian uses of the waterfront, and the numbers are extremely high. These people are going to be suddenly shut off a conduit that they're used to using within roughly 2 weeks with virtually no notice. These dislocations are going to be enormous. So we really would appreciate you guys, between now and December 7th, go back to the drawing board, give us some options that are a little better than the ones that we've seen so far, and certainly the ones we've heard about tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And there are some things that could be implemented more quickly, as we've seen on some of the crosstown bike lanes that have been implemented that were done safely and successfully. And yeah, hope you can do it here. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Jean and Ann, and we are actively coordinating with DOT and EDC, and we will continue to, and thank you for your comments, and we will take them back to those meetings.
Thank you.
I strongly echo those two great comments as well. All right, so I know it's getting late, so I'm going to move to the two Q&As we have right now. So number one is about Astrolevy. There's a clarification specifically. Does the track area include the AstroTurf field? And will small kids, swings, etc., park between basketball and handball courts be kept open?
Hi,
John,
this
do you
is.
want to... Oh, sorry, go ahead. Is that Melissa?
Yeah, it looked like it, yeah.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Melissa.
this is Melissa Haldeman from Parks. Yeah, I suppose John could have answered that question. On the slide that shows the Astrolevy closures, it shows that the track will be left open. That does include the AstroTurf field. And the handball court will be open. The swing area will not be open. The rest of the playground is being reconstructed under this project.
I have to ask the question. So it's open for the time being. Is there a plan to potentially close the track and the handball court in the sort of immediate to near future?
No.
Okay.
No, the AstroTurf's in the middle of the track, right? That's just why I got confused for a second. Okay,
Right.
but you guys said it was between, and I was out there. I was okay. It's in the middle there. Yeah, the turf field. Sorry. Yeah, that's going to stay open with the track.
Great. But both the track and the AstroTurf, they're not going to be closed in the near to immediate future?
Correct. Yeah, they're going to stay open. A lot of people use that.
Absolutely. We heard from a lot of them this week. So
yeah.
All right, question two. Will the pedestrian access paths be wide enough to accommodate social distancing? Sounds like this might be answered more in depth potentially by the 7th. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, which specific pedestrian access path? Just with whatever is rerouted from the Greenway?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that would be addressed on the 7th, but as soon as that is worked out with the contractor, then we can definitely address that. But COVID is considered at every step of the project, so it will be safe, and I think that's the main point there.
Okay, so before we dismiss everybody, I just want to get all ducks in the row. So we will not be having a December land use meeting next month. So there obviously will be a lot of news that will come out, in the next weeks, days, etc. I want to make sure that everybody sort of is abreast of these updates. So I guess, Jean, so you will be having a meeting on December 7th to be discussing.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And DOT and Co will be there to present what's going on in Avenue C that's already been addressed in Area 3, or excuse me, Project Area 1. And then potential pencil sharpening updates between now and then, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay. And so with the DDC team, if it would be possible to provide us with maybe another text or a presentation update or something along those lines between basically the middle part of December to the early part of January, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, Adam, I should just, reiterating what Desiree said, we'll be sure to, just like the emails that you've been receiving this past week or so, we'll be sure to keep everybody in the loop via email. Since you won't be meeting till January, we don't want to go dark until then for a month or so. And then Jean, back to the December 7th transportation meeting, DOT will be there as well as DDC. So we'll be there to obviously focus on the reroute, but if in case any questions come up with regards to the Escr project, we'll be there to be able to answer that too.
Excellent, thank you, because I'm sure that the pedestrian byways are also going to come up as well as other aspects of this that deal with the transportation aspects of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, team, for another informative session. Wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving, and until next time, please be safe and be well.
Thank you, you as well.
Hey, thanks.
Appreciate all your
everyone.
hard work.
Happy
Thanks,
Thanksgiving.
Adam,
Yeah, my
for your
pleasure.
patience.
No, this was very informative. So anyway, I'm going to move into the chair's report. There's a couple things to update, but I'll be very brief. I'm sure some of you saw the news this past week. Mr. Solo passed away. And so what does that mean for the large field that's been sitting fallow for a decade plus in this district? I don't know, but I got several text messages and emails being like, hey, did you see this? And the answer was yes. So this may very well be coming up in the distant future. How soon? Unclear. So, but when we're asked to take action or anything of that nature, we'll be sure to respond to it. Two, another thing people pointed out to me a lot last week too is that in the instance of helicopter nuisances, apparently our district filed many hundred, maybe thousands of noise complaints from helicopters within Manhattan. And most of these helicopters were not originating from CB6, from our heliport, but rather, flying over from New Jersey or things of that nature. I know Lou's brought this up a lot in the past. I think there is, this is something we might want to address in January, specifically in regards to Carolyn Maloney has legislation out about this, because this is in fact a federal issue. New Jersey helicopters buzzing over us, it's definitely an FAA issue. So maybe we want to re-examine this issue more in depth at our January meeting, and maybe some new legislation will have been proposed and that we might be able to comment on.
Is that land use or transportation?
So it fits in us because the waterfront. So we can let the new chair.
Well, Adam and I discussed this, Ann, and in fact, since land use has been dealing, and Lou has been specifically dealing with the helipad problems and problems with choppers, we sort of agreed to let it go there.
Works for me. It's just,
it was a coin flip.
Right, exactly.
It'll get examined somewhere, and with Zoom, you can just tune in now, so it's it'll get done.
Hey, I'm on both. Half the time I can't remember which issue came up on which committee.
Well, you took the minutes last time, so that was really great that you were able to bring that up for the team, because thank God somebody remembered what we were asking for. So thank you very much. Thank you again for doing the minutes as well. Thank you for bringing them back up during this meeting.
And kudos to Kavitha for boy, good luck on this month, right?
I'm on page 7.
You know what? YouTube, if you need to go back, our YouTube video is actually super helpful if you just need to check in, and as are the board office folks.
Yeah. And thank you, Kavitha, for the minutes. If you need any help with that or anything like that, Cody will be sure to help you out. I believe Jim did minutes a couple months ago just by watching the rerun of this. So a lot of things suck right now, but you know, I think these Zoom meetings, I think there's definitely a lot of positive benefits to it. And so we did our first ULURP via Zoom. So I mean, I think that was a very big deal. Hats off to everyone, to each and every one of you here in the Brady Bunch box. That's all I have. Does anyone have any old or new business they want to discuss? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your patience this evening. I think we covered a lot of ground. We'll definitely be following up with DDC and their copious outstanding issues. If you haven't signed up for the ESCR alerts, please do. I think they're extremely helpful as you know, at this time, and I think they can definitely be better. And if you weren't planning on attending Gene's December 7th, is that correct, Gene? All right, I would highly encourage that as well. Larry.
With regard to the ESCR updates, could you tell everybody how to get them?
Yeah, Cody will re-forward the link. But essentially, you just go to the ESCR website and you just sign up for it. You just put in your email. It's pretty simple.
Thank you.
Cody, you've had that in the like Wednesday emails, I think, right?
It ran in the last Wednesday email once they put out the flyer.
Yeah, I think what are they sending out every Wednesday now? Is that their deal? Not you, but them. Or no, today's Monday, so I guess at the start of the week every Monday. Must have minus. We'll figure it out. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Greatly appreciate it. I think we did a lot of good work tonight. And thank you to Sandro and Kavitha for writing a resolution with assistance from myself and editing specifically from Ann. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Excellent. Second. Thank you all. Have a safe, happy, healthy Thanksgiving with you and your loved ones. And I hope to hear from you all soon. Thanks. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, Adam. Bye.